Okay, everybody. Good evening. And let's begin right away with the third class in the series on meditation, Kabbalistic meditation. Basically, last week, we discussed one approach to meditation, which was the approach used by a particular branch of Kabbalah, of Kabbalists, following the system primarily of Rabbi Abraham Abu Lafia, lived in the 1000s, as we explained last time. So his system involves using holy names, each one associated with a different sphera, and various other combinations of letters from the Hebrew alphabet to bring about a state of ecstasy. Now, I'll describe that in a minute from his writings, but one of the things that he says to do is not only to meditate on the letters as they appear in a static form, but actually to combine the letters or to permutate the letters in different orders, and there's specific orders which he gives and how exactly to do this. Now, the idea then of permutating these letters, the permutations of the letters, is something that involves a lot of concentration, just to concentrate on the letters and to visualize the letters, to see them in front of you and so on and so forth. Is a powerful technique in and of itself. It's a technique mentioned by the Rizal. If you see the holy names as, let's say, like a wall surrounding you, right, way up, as if you're standing in the basement of a very large building, and you look up and it's all these letters all around you and completely dwarfing you, and you're within them, so to speak. That's one of the meditations that the Rizal, Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, gives. But besides the meditation on the static letters associated with with that particular holy name, or the letters associated, or the names associated with various angelic beings in different worlds, there's different angels, and each one has a key, so to speak, a name, a holy name by which to open the lock in order to get into that particular chamber, so to speak. But besides all that, besides the static letters, there's also, again, the permutation of the letters as they go in kind of a cycle. One of the ways in which it's possible to visualize this is if you imagine a wheel within a wheel. And on each wheel there are letters. And it could be a wheel within a wheel, so that you get 3-letter combinations. So whenever there's whenever there's kind of a combination, screen sharing. Oh, you want to see me? Okay, yeah, I was just seeing. All right, whatever. Fine, here I am. Okay, so let me move the camera in that case. Okay, so basically the idea again is that the permutation of the letters. The permutation of the letters requires a lot of concentration. If you imagine a wheel within a wheel within a wheel, and each of the spokes of the wheel is inscribed a letter. On each of the wait a second, what's going on here? This is strange. Share screen. One second. No, this is not good. I'm sorry, there's something going on here that's not. There we go. Nope. Well, there we go. Whatever. Okay, so let's just keep it like that. So the permutation of the letters, again, if the spokes all line up so that we would read one word, right? It would read one word with 3 letters. And if you can imagine one of the wheels, like let's say the inner wheel moving, or the middle wheel moving, or the outer wheel moving, and it keeps on moving to a new thing, like kind of like a roulette wheel, but the letters sort of line up like that. Sometimes called a magic wheel, which I think is not the right word for it, but in any event, you can just imagine it like that. And there's different permutations that come about as a result. He doesn't suggest using a wheel at all. He just suggests using these letters and knowing how to change the permutations. Now, we have discussed this before. We discussed it on a number of occasions, actually. I'll give you an example. One of the examples of this is, let me see if I can get up a whiteboard over here. Yeah, I'm going to share a whiteboard. Okay. I'm assuming everybody can see this, right? I don't see the chat, so let's see 1 second. Yes, everyone can see. Okay, very good. Let me move the chat away. Okay, so here we are. So let's say now we are, I'm going to do this in text just to make it easier. Hebrew. So we have the word, for example, we have the word, this is the one that I've explained to you before, Tzohar. I'll explain it again in a minute, exactly what I'm doing here, but the idea is, let me see if I can get them bigger. No, all right, whatever. All right, where does this word come from? The word Tzohar is a word which is found in the story about Noah, about Noah. God tells him when he's making the ark, Tzohar ta'aseh l'teva, make a window for the ark. Now, some of the rabbis interpret Tzohar as a window to let in the light. Others interpret it as a source of light, that he had to take with him a source of light. Whatever that source of light was, we're not 100% sure what it would have been. In any event, let's not worry about practically what it was. What we need to think about is the meaning. So, the word Tzohar is associated with light, whichever way you want to look at it, like the word Tzoharayim, which means afternoon in Hebrew, right? Tzoharayim, because it's the brightest time of the day. Now, the Baal Shem Tov, in explaining this idea, said as follows: when it's a time of tzara, you see the same letters, right? They're the same letters, except that the resh and the hey are switched around. Here the hey comes first, and then comes the resh. Here the resh comes first, and then the hey, tzara. So he says like this: how do you change tzara, which means anguish, trouble, a time of stress, distress? How do you change distress into a source of light, or into a window of opportunity, let's call it, or into a source of light? So there's various in-between stages, right? There's various in-between stages. One stage, the first stage, is haratz. Now, haratz you spell with a final tzadi, but it's the same letters as this, right? It would be spelled properly. The word would be spelled with that final. There's several letters which are final letters. They're called Mansapach, Mem, Nun, Tzadik, Chaf, and Pei. Or Pei and Chaf, Mansapach. In any event, sorry. The letters of the word haratz are also the same letters as this. The same letters as tzara, same letters as tzohar. Haratz means to run. When someone runs, there's another permutation. This permutation can be read as rotzeh. Rotzeh means to want. Right? So, to want, to desire something very strongly. So, the Baal Shem Tov explains, in order to be able to change troubled times, times of difficulty, times of stress, of distress, into a source of light, so what do you have to do? First of all, you have to do it with alacrity. Whatever you're going to do in order to change that one and the negative into the positive has to be done with alacrity, haratz. Right, haratz. And then he goes on to explain that this is, what is he ratz? What is he running to do? What God wants. Masha Kodesh Baruch Hu Rotzeh. What God wants, the word ratzah, or rotze is to want very strongly, to do what God wants, and to want to do what God wants, you have to run towards it. In other words, you have to run towards doing the right thing, because it's the right thing, because it's the will of God, and that will change over tzara into tzohar. Okay, so these then are simply permutations. There's more permutations possible here. There's 6 permutations possible, but only 4 of them have meaning. There's also another one, this one over here. Rahatz will also be a tzadik sofit at the end normally, but Rahatz and Hatzar. Hatzar is also a word. Hatzar, someone who's causing you the anguish. Hatzar, someone who's the person who is causing another person anguish. Whatever. Anyway, these are also 2 possible combinations, but we don't need them at the moment. So this is what the Baal Shem Tov says. This is the teaching of the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. Right? Someone who runs. We can delete these here. Someone who runs. So whatever. Someone who runs to do the will of God. He does it with alacrity. He can change over tzara into tzohar. He can change over trouble into a source of light. So now, Abu Lafia, Rabbi Abraham Abu Lafia, his meditation was meditation of this sort. He didn't meditate so much on the concepts, and that's something we have to speak about. He didn't meditate so much on the concepts. He meditated rather on the letters themselves. The letters themselves have a tremendous power, especially letters which have meaning, especially the names, divine names. So when one meditates on the divine names, and each sphira is associated with one of the names, then what happens is, Ratzon is God's will. Yes, same thing. Yeah. So when that happens, when one meditates on these things, so the end result is that a person has a tremendous arousal of inner qualities. And that can, just one second here, I'm sorry, this is not going the way it should do. I don't know why, but it's not. Okay, there we go. All right. Things are going wild today. Exactly what I changed the format of this a little bit, and I'm not so familiar with the new format. All right. Anyway, nothing happened. Okay, so basically then, the end result is what he says as follows. So let me just read something from Abu Lafia here, where he describes the results of where he describes the results of his experiences. He says like this: when you're alone and you have to isolate yourself in order to do this properly, a person should be isolated. Now, isolated doesn't mean to say you have to go out into the forest or into whatever to do it, or out into the hillsides. You can do it at home, but it's best to do it on your own so that you won't be disturbed. And he has various breathing exercises that he does. We're talking about the 1000s here. This is not, modern day yoga stuff. He has a whole bunch of breathing exercises that you do as well, which we don't need to get into now. But in any event, he says like this: when you isolate yourself and your desire is to receive the outflow from above, the godly outflow, or rather we would translate it, I suppose, as inflow, the flow into you from divine and of divine energy. So what you have to do is you have to rotate the letters in a certain order. You rotate the letters of a particular, he gives you combinations in his works. He gives the combinations of the letters that should be rotated. And that'll bring a person, when he's concentrating and focusing on rotating the letters, it needs a tremendous amount of concentration, and that brings you into a very deep meditative state. The normal working mind is sort of put out of gear, let's put it that way. In other words, your normal thinking processes are, I wouldn't say short-circuited, but they quietened down by this process. And as the letters rotate faster and faster in certainly these combinations, a person gets deeper and deeper into the meditation. And then he says the hairs on the back of your head, good thing he didn't say on the top of your head, because some people don't have them. The hairs at the back of your head start to rise up, and you feel sort of kind of like when you get a fright, a tremendous fright. You feel that kind of thing. The hair starts to stand up on the back of your head, and the blood in the heart starts to flow very quickly. In other words, it sort of speeds up the person's blood flow, speeds up your heartbeat, essentially. And then what happens is the body starts to tremble. It starts to tremble initially lightly, probably just from the hands or the hands and the feet. And then eventually one starts to not just tremble, but to shake. And the fear of God comes upon you, and you feel in yourself a spirit awakening. And it sort of takes over you completely. And then eventually, somewhere along the road, you will feel a sweet scent. You will sense a sweet scent descending upon you, like it's called shemen afrasamon. Shemen afrasamon is like persimmon oil, essentially, like scented oil that feels as if it's dripping down on your head and anointing your entire body. And the scent of it and the feeling of being anointed arouses in a person tremendous amount of joy. And so the person is rejoicing, even though this sense of awe or fear is still there, but with it's mixed into joy until the joy takes over completely. And then eventually the meditation dies down as he stops to concentrate on these permutations. So that is one type of meditation, and it's the type of meditation that most people do not do today for reasons which are we're not pure enough, and people kid themselves that they're really experiencing something. And it's important, if one is doing this kind of meditation, that the person has to do various purifications beforehand and make sure that they are following the dictates of Jewish law as it's supposed to be done. Otherwise, A, it's probably not going to get you anywhere, and B, it could even be possibly harmful. Okay, so that's one type of meditation. Meditations on the names, and even when the names are no longer static, but they're moving, rotating. Now, there's another type of meditation which is much more common and which is done today. Many people do this kind of meditation, And this meditation is suggested by Rabbi Yitzhak Luria and many, many others. It's found in the Paradise. It's found in many, many places. It's even brought in the Code of Jewish Law. And that is to combine, not permutate, but to combine two names. I mentioned before in the previous class that what the meditation on holy names does is it interfaces the name that you're meditating on, interfaces with the light in the vessel. The name is really the associated with the energy of the vessel, of the sphera. And then there's the light of the vessel, which is the name, the ineffable name, the four-letter name, the name Yud, K, Vav, K. Right? A Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey. Let me just get back to my whiteboard again, and let's have a look at it one more time. Okay, so here we are going to look at the name, which is spelled Yud K Vav K. When that name is combined with another name, with a name, for instance, of Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud, that brings about what is called a yichud. A yichud. These are yichudim. Yichud means a unification. Right. So if you look in many prayer books, you will see that the name is therefore spelt as follows. Taking the Yud from here, and then the letter from here, the first letter from here, the second letter, third letter, etc., right? So it would then be spelled like this. There we go. I left out a Nun somewhere over along the line here. That would be a Nun. That would be a Nun over here. A Nun over here. Anyway, that is the combination of these two letters, of these two. This is the name that's associated with a light, and this is associated with a vessel. So combining the two together, we get this. This combination. Here we get this combination. That can be done with several different names and several different possibilities over here. But the whole concept of a yichud, of a unification, is in itself a very, very powerful meditation, and to concentrate on this combination of letters demands quite a lot of concentration, actually, and that brings one into a deep meditative state. There is a letter from the Maggid Mezritch, the successor to the Baal Shem Tov, where he's speaking to his disciples, and he tells them that he has, for each country that he's sending to, each Medina, each state that he's sending them to, each country essentially that he's sending them to, there's a particular permutation that each country has. And he's giving the person who is going to that country to spread the teachings in that country, he's giving him that permutation in order for things to go smoothly. So that things will go smoothly, things will go in the proper way. Okay, so this is one of the things that can be used also in meditation. Now, this whole concept of yichudim, of these unifications, are dependent very much on the individual and what it is that you're trying to achieve, which unifications you should use, which sphera you are particularly associated with will depend on what meditation, what combination of names is the right one for the average individual. Now, the story is told about Rabbi Chaim Vital. Rabbi Chaim Vital was the chief disciple of Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, the Arizal, and the one who wrote down most of his teachings, transmitted most of his teachings in writing. So, there's a story that one day the Arizal told Rabbi Chaim Vital to go to a certain place and to meditate over there, and he gave him some holy names on which to meditate. And he said he needs that in order for his to elevate his soul, right? He needs to do a certain rectification over there, a purification, rectification, and then concentrate on these holy names, and there'll be a certain spark of holiness added to his soul. Anyway, he did this. He went there, and when he came back in the evening, as he walked into the door of the study hall where the Arizal was, the Arizal stood up as a sign of, obviously as a sign of respect. Now, the Arizal was the teacher, and Rabbi Chaim Vital was the student. The teacher usually doesn't stand for the student. It used to be in the old days that the students would stand up when the teacher walked into the room. I know that probably doesn't happen in American classrooms, but doesn't mean to say it's not. The students should stand up when the teacher walks into the room. That's just the right. That's the Torah etiquette. The student stands until the teacher takes his seat, and then he sits down. If you ever saw on video, perhaps a video of a discourse or a gathering of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, you'll see that as he walks in, everyone is standing up, and when he sits down, then everybody sits down. You're talking about a room of thousands and thousands of people. Yeah, those are the good old days for sure, right? So, thank you. Someone says, yeah, I would definitely stand if I came into the room. All right, I appreciate it. But okay, so it is always the right thing to do is to stand up for someone who's for an elderly person. Lifnei seva takum. Stand up. It's actually a verse in the Torah, and it's a mitzvah. It's one of the commandments of the Torah. Stand before a wise or an older person, male or female. And in fact, we were taught, I was taught that when your father comes into the room or your mother comes into the room, you stand up. You don't have to remain standing the whole time, but you stand up, or you at least you lift yourself up a drop. That's the proper etiquette, to lift yourself, just lift yourself up a little bit like that, as a sign of, if a rabbi walks into the room, even though he might be younger than you, but he's the rabbi of the synagogue or whatever, things like that, you should show that respect. In any event, so to get back to the story, so the Arizal stands up for Rabbi Chaim Vital. Rabbi Chaim Vital was older than him, true, but he was the student, and the Arizal was the teacher. So Rabbi Chaim Vital expressed his puzzlement. Why did the rabbi stand up? So he said, I didn't stand up because of you. I stood up because of who came in with you. So he said, what do you mean? So he said, well, the sage, not just the sage, but actually one of the 48 prophets in the Hebrew Bible, Benayahu ben Yehoiada, one of the 48 prophets, when you walked into the room, he walked in with you. Tell me what you did when I sent you to do that meditation. So he described his day that he went and he sat down some distance away from the place that the Arizal had told him to go to. He sat down at some distance and he practiced the yichud. That's what we're talking about now, the yichud. He practiced the yichud until he knew it perfectly, he could visualize it perfectly. Right? You could visualize, it's all visualization, not you don't use the words, until you could visualize it perfectly. Then he went to the place that he was told to go and did the meditation over there. So the Arizal said, describe to me the place where you sat down to practice. And he described it and he said, you should know that place is actually the kever, it's the or the tziyun, the resting place of the prophet Benayahu ben Yehoiada. You were sitting on his grave, right? You were sitting or right next to, you were sitting right next to it, right next to his grave. And that's why when you did that yichud, his soul cleaved to yours. And that's why he came in with you. That's why he stood up. Okay, so there are many different meditations for different occasions, for different ideas and different things that need to be achieved. Some of these are for healing. Some of them are for to overcome a particular problem that a person has. There's all kinds of reasons that that this might be that one might do various of these types of meditation. So, just to summarize, we started off talking about, again, meditating on divine names and then permutating the names, the permutation of letters and divine names, which is a technique that is used by Abu Lafia together with various breathing exercises. And then we spoke more about the concept of combining names, which are essentially combining various powers or combining various sfirot together. The one that I showed you before, where we combine the Yud, K, Vav, K with Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud, that's a combination that's melding together, bringing together Tiferet and Malchut, right? The two sfirot of Tiferet and Malchut. So what happens when one brings these two sfirot together? When there's a yichud between the sfirot, not only do they intermingle and therefore share what each of them doesn't have or what each of them has to a lesser extent. In other words, Tiferet is primarily the main sphera of the what's called the Partzuf of Zer Anpin. So that idea is the idea of compassion. Whereas the sphera of Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud is associated with Malchut. And Malchut is the concept of speech, amongst many other things. It's the concept primarily of speech. Malchut Peh, Torah Sheba'al Peh Karinan La. Malchut is the mouth, speech. It's the oral Torah, the oral teachings. So therefore, what will happen, therefore, when one combines these two forces is that compassion and speech are combined so that speech becomes compassionate. And compassion gets expression, right? Compassion becomes expressed through the mouth. And what is expressed through the mouth is compassion. That's the combination of the two things. But there's something more that happens as well. Whenever you combine two elements, a third quality is also brought into being. This is what the Talmud hints at when it talks about the idea of there are three partners in making a human being. There's the mother and father of the child, the mother and father, each of which gives some of their DNA, some of their qualities, whatever they happen to be. The Talmud sees it that men give one thing and women give a different thing, and the combination of them makes the baby. Obviously, man gives sperm and a woman gives the egg, etc. But in a spiritual sense, the man gives certain qualities, and the female gives other qualities. The male gives the male sfirot, and the female gives the female sfirot. The male sfirot are chokhmah, primarily male sfirot. Chokhmah, chesed, netzach. Chokhmah, chesed, netzach, and tiferet to a large extent. Whereas the woman primarily is bina, gvura, and malchut. The male is also Yesod, actually. I left Yesod out. Although Yesod and Tiferet are really shared sfirot. In any event, each of them gives what they, if we're talking about it in terms of DNA, each of them, the husband and the wife, the male and the female, each give their DNA to the birth of the baby. But that's not enough. There's a third partner. The third partner is the one who gives the soul, the life force. because it can happen that the male and female combine, but there's no life force, the spark doesn't happen, right? Doesn't happen. The spark, the life force, and eventually the soul that is breathed into the child when it's born, that comes from above. So those are the three partners: husband, wife, and God. So similarly, whenever there's a yichud done, a combination of sfirot or combination of names, which brings about a combination of the sfirot, a yichud of the sfirot, so a new light is elicited from above, which transcends both of them. Just like the light of God transcends both the mother and the father. So there's a question here from Steve. Are we in effect performing a simple yichud when we pronounce Aleph Daled Nun Yud for the written Yud? Yes, we are. However, one should visualize it as well. It's not enough because speech is linear. Speech can only be linear. You can only say one word. I mean, you can say many words at a time, but it's not gonna work out too well. No one will understand what you're saying. In fact, in the Ten Commandments, if you look at the Ten Commandments, that are mentioned in this week's Torah reading, there's a repetition of the Ten Commandments. This week's Torah reading is called Jethro, the story of Yitro, where the Torah was given, the Ten Commandments were given in this week's Torah reading. But there's another Torah reading which is done in the summer in Parshat Ve'etchanan, where the Ten Commandments are repeated by Moses. It's in the last book of the Torah in Dvarim, in the Parsha called Eschanan, and he repeats the Ten Commandments. In the Ten Commandments which you read in this week, it says, Zachor es Yom HaShabbos l'kadshor, remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. When Moses repeats it, he says, Shamor, guard the Sabbath to keep it holy. Difference between remember and guard, there's a difference between them. But the Talmud, in discussing this, the Talmud says that both of them were said at the same time. God can say two things at the same time, Zachor v'Shamor, remember and God, he can say at the same time, but we can't. We have to speak linearly because we hear linearly. Whereas when we see things, we don't see linearly. We see the entire picture, right? Therefore, it's not enough just to pronounce the word, one has to actually see it, which is why, particularly in Sephardi Sidurim, in the prayer book which Sephardim use and Kabbalists use, you'll see the names actually combined. They're written in a combined form. Yeah, they're written in a combined form. So, that's the concept of yichudim. Now, there are other kinds of yichudim as well. There are yichudim which are used in the mitzvot when performing a mitzvah. There's particular yichudim which have not only to do with divine names, but also with certain actions and certain ideas which are brought together. This idea of yichudim is brought actually into the teachings of the Zohar. Speaks about two kinds of yichud, called yichudei Elah and yichud Torah, the higher unity and the lower unity. And that's explained in several ways, but explained in a very specific way in Hasidic teachings, which we will get to in a subsequent class, and that's going to be one of the main meditations which we're going to focus on and actually discuss much more, and perhaps even do. Maybe we'll even try and we'll actually try it out while we're busy here, and we'll see what happens. Everyone will disappear. Okay, so let me see now. There's some questions. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording here and I'll look at the questions now.